For almost 50 years, Midway USA has been America's go-to source for just about everything for shooting, hunting, and the outdoors. Go to midwayusa.com to see our latest deals and promotions and take advantage of our super fast same-day shipping. If you need a cooler, a new fishing rod, another rifle, ammo, or a reloading press, you can find it all at midwayusa.com. Thanks for your business. Midway USA brand product designers have one straightforward goal: develop high-quality, technically sound products and deliver them to customers at reasonable prices. If you are immersed in the shooting sports industry and pay close attention to every single detail, you know our products are built right and stand up to everyday use. Who has shooting mats and range bag systems to hunting clothing and just about everything for the outdoors? Log on and shop 24/7 with super fast shipping. MidwayUSA.com.
Welcome to the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast. I'm Matthew of castingacross.com, where I explore the quarry and culture of fly fishing. Episode 371. Real quick, had some awesome listener, reader, and viewer feedback that I was able to respond to last week. As always, keep that coming. Don't wait for 8 weeks and send me something. Matthew at castingacross.com. I'll get back to you soon. Another quick administrative note. My website is not sending out my newsletters. There's an issue that is deep within the recesses of the coding, and that's beyond my area of expertise. And I'm also not in a position to spend hours and hours trying to fix it. So if you are used to getting a weekly newsletter showing the articles and podcasts that have come out, that hasn't come out for 2 weeks, and I don't see it coming out in the next couple weeks because I do want to spend some time doing Christmas stuff, not necessarily fiddling with code and potentially breaking the website. So I'm very thankful and blessed that the website itself is working just fine. But if you have been missing that newsletter, that is why it has not come out. With all that said, I'm going to have probably a short podcast today. And why is that? Because the topic is enormous. So sometimes I see these really big topics. I think that'd be really good to cover. And then I realize I don't want to spend an hour talking. And maybe this will be a multiple episode kind of series of one particular topic. But I really think what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw the rock across the surface of the deep pond and allow you to go do some research if anything that I say piques your interest. And part of the reason is not only because the topic is huge, is the topic is diverse. Because today we are talking about different types of classifications or designations for trout water. So water bodies that are managed for or at least encompassed in trout fishing. And again, there's the diversity because each state's can be different. For example, I live here in New Hampshire, and we have at least 6 designations for trout waters. There's designated trout ponds, fly fishing only waters, New Hampshire remote trout ponds, wild trout fishing opportunities, stocked rivers and streams, open year-round, and stocked lakes and ponds, open year-round. We have ice fishing up here, so there's a lot of opportunities for that. But these 6 different designations are going to be very different than your state, than your Commonwealth. So another example is Virginia. I've spent a lot of time fishing in Virginia, and they have not only their general water, they have their delayed harvest water, but they have waters where are trout waters where bait is allowed, trout waters where there's a 9-inch minimum, trout waters where there's a 16-inch minimum, 2 fish per day, and then they have let me just collect myself, 20-inch minimum, 1 fish per day, fly fishing only. Let me stop here for a second. I don't express a lot of frustration on the podcast, but this regulation is one of the more frustrating things that I can contemplate about a state that is very, very near and dear to my heart. I consider myself at least in part a Virginian, and so much of my formative fly fishing experiences happened in the Commonwealth of the Old Dominion state. But the 20-inch minimum, 1 fish per day, fly fishing only rules, which apply to South River as well as Mossy Creek, are just silly, in my humble opinion. I know. These fisheries were hard fought for, big conservation projects that flow through primarily private lands, and so certain bones have to be thrown. But these are 2 rivers where the 20-inch, 22-inch, 24-inch trout that swim there do not need to be harvested. And thankfully, a lot of folks throw them back, but I also know a lot of people are poaching fish that are much smaller than this. And so, I'm not going to change anything through the Casting Across Fly Fishing podcast. However, I'm just voicing a little bit of frustration. There's plenty of places in the state where you can go and catch big fish to go home and, I guess, bake, fry, broil, whatever. But those two creeks are not two creeks where this should be happening. Anyway, the other regulation that they have in Virginia is catch and release only. And so you just see that's two examples of two different states here on the East Coast where we have like 6 or 7 different designated trout waters. But what I'm going to do is kind of compress them into 3 different types. And of course, there's going to be different derivations within each of these. And we'll talk about them, what they mean, and maybe why they are put into place, which again, this is very, very general, broad overview. And then also kind of how you would approach fishing them, just from like a mindset perspective, with each of them. So the first one, and I'll start with this, is just general regulation water. So this is going to be a lake or a stream or a pond that doesn't have any sort of special trout regulations attached to it. Now, it may be that the state says anywhere you catch a trout in our state, it has to be at least 12 inches, and you can only keep 6 of them. And this is a rule that will apply to a creek where the stocking truck comes and dumps, a quadrillion fish in there, a couple times during the springtime. Or it applies to any river. If for some reason you're out fishing for catfish in the middle of summertime and you catch rainbow trout, well, you can keep it if it's over 12 inches, and you can only keep 5 more of his buddies, even though you weren't expecting to catch that fish. Now, you're probably not going to catch a lot of trout if you're fishing for catfish, but there's a lot of rivers and there's a lot of streams and there's a lot of ponds and there's a lot of lakes where it's not necessarily a trout fishing spot, but you're going to run into trout. I've had that happen where I've been fishing for smallmouth up here in big lakes in New Hampshire, and I've caught rainbows. Where in the world does this thing come from? Now, it is the case where a private landowner may have thrown some in somewhere, but what is more often the case is that fish move. I've talked about this before in the podcast. Fish are no respecters of signs, seeing that placard up on a tree, special regulation water, catch and release only, something like that. Or they don't know how to read maps. At least I don't think they know how to read maps. And so they don't know that, I'm supposed to be in Spring Creek. There's probably, 4 or 5 spring creeks in every state. And, it sounds like a great place for trout fishing, right? That trout doesn't say, I'm supposed to stay in Spring Creek because that's where I was stocked or that's where I was hatched. That's where I should be. Because different times of the year or for different circumstances, they're going to swim down to whatever the river is, Blue River, right? So they live in Spring Creek, but they only are a couple hundred yards from the mouth where it dumps into Blue River. Well, if the water gets really, really cold in Spring Creek, they might go down into Blue River. If they are getting bigger and they are competing for space in Spring Creek, they might drop down a little bit. And all of a sudden now, as long as conditions are okay in Blue River, now they're swimming around in Blue River. And they probably are enjoying a wider variety of forage, particularly if they become piscivorous, if they are eating fish. And so all this goes to show that the waters that don't have any special trout regulations are not off limits for you as an angler. In fact, this is something I encourage people to do all the time, is fish below where you usually fish. So that is to say, if you fish in a particular creek, and it's where you fish and where there's trout is anywhere near another water body, go and fish that. Go and fish the lake. I had one day, actually it was in western Massachusetts, where I was fishing in a creek and I was doing okay. And I just kept following the creek downstream and downstream. And I get to where it dumped out into a lake, really swampy, as most of Massachusetts is. And I walked out there. I started bombing along, casting this lake and slowly stripping streamers and catching trout after trout after trout. The lake was not managed for trout fishing. The stream was. But guess what? The fish got down in there. And you can have a lot of fun fishing these waters that are not quote-unquote trout waters if you know kind of generally how fish move around and just make a couple of casts. Fish will move from stream to stream using these larger rivers as highways and seeking out opportunities. They will go from one, Spring Creek, and then they'll go down to Blue River, and then they'll move around during the winter time where maybe it's a little bit warmer in Blue River, and then they pop up in, Little Spring Creek, which happens to be, a couple hundred yards downstream in a really, really tiny little feeder creek. And so you can go find fish in places where You're not going to see it in the guidebook. You're not going to see it on the list of stock trout waters. You're not going to find it on the map that lists the different types of trout streams in that particular state. Go and explore. Go and adventure. Don't be scared. If the conditions are right for trout, trout will find their way there. And so, that's something I would just encourage you to do. And this is actually that piece of advice more than anything else is why this is not a Cast One podcast. The Cast One kind of sub series of Casting Across is like beginner information. But what I just said about encouraging you, the angler, whether you've been fishing for 25 years or 5 years or 25 minutes, this is the first fly fishing podcast you ever listened to. Don't stick to the special regulations water exclusively. You're missing out on so many opportunities. I learned that the hard way, kind of like late in high school, early college. Like, why was I only fishing these fly fishing only waters where I was like shoulder to shoulder with people so often? So that's the first kind of group of water. So yeah, just go fish it. Fish it like you would fish any other river. Fish it like you'd fish any other stream. I would say maybe fish a little bit quicker. Don't be as slow and deliberate because you're prospecting for fish. You're trying to see if there's something there. The other cool thing about these waters is that you might be fishing for trout, but who knows what you're going to catch. You're going to find your way into some really, really cool fish if you go fish places that aren't like quote unquote trout fisheries. All right, there's the first regulations. The second one is kind of that middle ground where there are some special regulations, but they're not necessarily catch and release, not necessarily fly fishing only. So waters like this might have a season where it is put and take, or a season where it is catch and release, but you can use more tackle. A lot of times these are fisheries where they do restrict it from the use of bait. Or restrict it from the use of bait for most of the season because, as you probably know, bait is more easily ingested, goes down deeper, and has a higher chance of mortality. So even for a fish that somebody might want to throw back, it's going to significantly increase its chance of going belly up and floating downstream. It's like it's on a fun little tubing ride, only it's dead. So these waters should not be something that you are scared of either. Just because certain times of the year people are in there throwing spinning rods, keeping a creel full of fish, doesn't mean that you shouldn't fish them. Some of my favorite fisheries you can keep fish out of, and it's not like my complaint earlier about that 20-inch, one fish Mossy Creek thing. But this is other streams where they are popular fisheries. And they have some wild fish and they have some stock fish. Now, ideally, they're not stocking the same species of the fish that are wild, certainly if they're brook trout here on the East Coast. But you can get in there and you can find fish that are going to hold over. You're going to find a hardy fish that is going to put up a good fight and be a real challenge. And a lot of times, there's just so much water. I think, most fisheries agencies aren't just randomly assigning these regulations to different streams. There's so much data and so much science and so much research and so much empirical gathering of actual pounds of fish per river mile that these regulations are done with discernment. And this is actually where, this is beyond the scope of this podcast because each one of these regulations that is put in place by each one of these state agencies, has some sort of trigger to why it's this, why it's that. It also plays off of, land and access and things like that. But a nice thing about these waters, this category I'm talking about now, these special regulations, is that there probably has been some infrastructure help that has been thrown in. So whereas with a general fishing regulation, you might just be walking up the stream, pulling up to the river and finding your way down there. A lot of times these special regulations water, there's been paths, there's been parking lots, things like that get put in, and it makes it a little bit more user friendly. There's a couple of rivers here in New England that I fish that are like this, where there's not a whole lot of trout. It's just not thick with them, but they're in there, and they're in there enough that you can go and catch fish, but they're not there to the degree that it's going to be crowded with people who are trying to catch their limit every day. And so there's opportunities that are there, and they could be much closer to home. I mean, these two particular rivers I'm thinking of are like half an hour away, as opposed to some of the little bit more fly fishing only water, which might be more like an hour away. So don't be scared of going to fish somewhere where there's somebody throwing a spinning rod. which kind of gets me to the next point, which is catch and release water. Now, catch and release water isn't necessarily fly fishing only water. That does exist in a lot of places, and I think that's great. And let me talk about that real quick, because there's actually a suit that's being brought in the state of Maine right now by people who said that fly fishing only is depriving them of opportunities to fish with other gear. Well, in the state of Maine, that might be the most ridiculous thing I've heard, because there is so much water there. I mean, it's a ridiculous volume of water, both in rivers, small streams, lakes, and small ponds. I mean, you cannot swing a dead loon, which you shouldn't do, poor things, without hitting water that has trout in it. Has wild brook trout, has native brook trout, has some other variations of char in there. So for people to be upset that there are fly fishing only water is a little bit silly. And why is there fly fishing only water? Let's address this real quick. Oftentimes, fly fishing only water is put in place for conservation reasons, not necessarily for exclusivity reasons. And of course, exclusivity is absolutely laughable. If you go to Walmart, you can get a fly fishing rig, anything and everything you need, for like $45, right? You get on Amazon, you can find the stuff that's being sold for much, much more expensively in the fly shops for $25-$30, and it's going to go out and catch fish. And it's very, very silly to think of, how much money you could spend on like a bass boat and try to translate that into a drift boat and a bunch of fly rods. Yeah, fly fishing is not exclusive. That's a myth. It's preposterous. But having fly fishing only water is most often not for sport. It is for conservation. And why is that? Generally speaking, a fly angling approach is less detrimental to the health of the fish than a treble hook or a hook with bait on it. Generally speaking, that is the case. Are you going to kill fish on a fly rod? Absolutely. Are you going to be able to release trout that you caught on a big dough ball power bait? You probably can. However, the statistics show that it's much safer to release them if you are using a small barbless fly, right? Another reason why water becomes fly fishing only is because the access is granted by the landowners, and they say, you know what, we want this type of angling to be what happens here. We don't want people. We're okay with people accessing the land. We're okay with people accessing the water. We're okay with people fishing for the fish, but we don't want the place to get fished out. And so there is generous things that happen by the landowner, which of course is probably tax breaks and kickbacks and things like that. But it's not a let's deprive the people who like using the spinning rod. That's not what happens. And this is what I was getting to. A lot of these catch and release waters aren't fly fishing only. They're catch and release, no kill. And so what are the regulations? It might be no bait, because like I said before, bait is just easier to kill, which, you know what? If you want to kill fish, use bait all day long. Go for it, right? I have no problem with that. But you can still use spinning gear. You just got to take off those treble hooks in most states, in most areas, and put on a single hook. And so, be aware of that. If you see somebody throwing a spinning rod in the catch and release water, know the regs before you go up and angrily confront them. I saw that happen to a guy, and he had to get corrected by another angler on a stream in Pennsylvania, and he was definitely embarrassed and didn't apologize, but he definitely should have. But fly fishing only water, or catch and release water, yes, go fish these. Fish this because there's probably some awesome angling opportunities. That said, I bet these fish have seen a lot of hooks and seen a lot of anglers and seen a lot of artificial flies flow in front of them. Because even if these fish get supplemented by stocking, they have probably been caught, at least been stung, and have thrown back in there. So the idea for a new fly fisher that, I need to go fish this fly fishing only water because there's going to be more fish in there, that might be true. But you may have a quicker access to both wild fish and stocked fish in a kind of a special regulation water that allows for harvesting. It's not necessarily more fish and more opportunities to get into fish in a fly fishing only or a catch and release area because those fish might be more hook shy, or it could be, and this is a story I want to share, it could be that this is done again for conservation reasons. I was traveling down the Mid-Atlantic, and I found that a river was a catch and release water. I was like, this is awesome. I'm going to go fish it. Man, I got there, and I could not see a single trout. I sat still. I waited carefully. I probed. I used all of my techniques for kind of prospecting for trout. And I saw some fish rising, ended up being fall fish, saw some fish kind of feeding on the bottom, ended up being suckers. Thinking, what in the world is going on? This fly fishing only water, it's barren of trout. Come to find out, the regulations had just been put in place like 2 months ago prior to me going there. And the reason was the state, in partnership with local conservation organizations, said that this is water that has the potential to carry fish. The landowners said, we don't want to shut it down until it builds itself back up. We do want to limit the type of angling and limit the killing. We don't want that happening. And so this was fly fishing only water, or excuse me, catch and release water. These are not synonymous, and I keep doing them which is not helpful. Is catch and release water, not because there were so many fish that people want to protect. It was because there was not a lot of fish and they wanted to protect them. So different areas are going to get those regs for different reasons. So this would be the kind of place where if you're a new angler or an angler is trying to hone their skills, the last place in the world you'd want to go. Just on the other side of the valley, there's a place where it was thick with stocked fish. Now you may say, well, I don't want to catch stocked fish. That's all fine and good, but if you want to catch fish, that's where you want to go. That's where you throw your egg pattern. That's where you throw your honey bug. That's where you throw, the cigarette butt fly, right? Yeah, you should, if you fish stocked water, you fish like close to public parks, if you can tie up a little deer hair cigarette butt, you're going to catch yourself some trout. Trust me. So anyway, all that to say, it is not like a no fish in the no regs, all the fish in the most constricting regs. It's not how it works. Now, that said, I love fishing fly fishing only water. I love fishing catch and release water. I like the challenge oftentimes of those fish that I know that are in there, but they've probably been a little bit pressured, but also may be a challenge, not because they've been pressured, but because they're wild or even native fish. And so it's that choice that you can go and find those fish, and it might be a little bit more work, and you're also going to potentially have to fish right behind somebody, because a lot of times it's not 10-15 river miles that get these regulations. It's maybe a mile, maybe a small bit of water, but those fish are going to get pressured. Now, that said, another anecdote. Again, I said this is going to be a short podcast. Here we're at 20 minutes, right? There's a fly fishing only stream that I fished quite frequently for a number of years. And one summer, I caught the same brook trout twice a week for probably like 3 weeks in a row. Probably caught this fish like 7 or 8 times, right? And after a while, I'm thinking, this is not a very smart fish. And I'm going to stop casting in that hole, because I know there's probably more fish in there, but I'm catching the exact same like 14-inch brook trout. It was really cool like the second time. And then I'm thinking like this poor guy. And it wasn't that there was a bunch of 14-inch brook trout. This was one very distinctive looking little guy. But it just goes to show that we don't know how the mind of a fish works. It's not that complicated, but we still don't understand how it works. We don't understand how our minds work. Big Pharma likes to think that we do, but we don't. Much less so the mind of a simple-brained little trout. All right, so again, a lot of very, very, very high-level general information on different classifications of trout water, but maybe a few ways to think about them. And what I would say is go to your state regs, see what's around. You might even know from just fishing there already. See what's around, see what the different designations are, and then go and fish maybe one of each. I listed 6 here in New Hampshire, but you can kind of break them down into those 3 categories: the catch and release, the special regs, and then the general water. And go and see if you enjoy one more than the other. Now, that's not going to be some sort of hard and fast rule. All the fishing is going to be in this category. All the fishing is going to be like this in this category. All the fishing is going to be like this in that category. But I think it's a good exercise in diversifying your angling and in taking advantage of, although they're not like hard and fast, but kind of general regulations that get placed by the state. So check it out. Let me know what you think, what you find. Let me know if your state has even weirder regulations than the 2 that I have mentioned. This week on castingacross.com, 2 articles. The first is Casting Across Presents at the Fly Fishing Show 26. So this is where I list 3 of my 4 presentations. Number 4 is still getting worked on. It's still coming together. Hopefully it works out. We're efforting to make it happen, because it's not just me who would be presenting. So there are 3 listed there, 2 right now for Marlborough, Massachusetts, and 1 for Edison, New Jersey. Had an absolute blast last year doing this. It was a lot of fun doing this, and so I'm looking forward again to it this year. and get a little bit more of a premier spot for a couple of my presentations at both shows. So check that out. If you are going to be there, then please stop and say hey. If you can't make it to my show, shoot me a thing on social media and say, hey, listen, I read. That's always a lot of fun. Last year was really cool meeting folks that listen to the podcast or read Casting Across. So check those out, and there will be an update when presentation number 4 is live. Wednesday's post is called Video Giving a Fly Fishing Book. So I've done book reviews for like 40 plus weeks here on Casting Across. This week I did like a gift giving guide. So I did this on the podcast a few weeks ago. It wasn't a gift guide. It was a gift giving guide, types of gifts you can give. This is the same thing with books. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different types of anglers and kinds of books you could give to him or her on this video. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do so. Just Casting Across, click subscribe, like the videos, do whatever you need to do, like the cool kids say. This week's recommendation on the podcast is another podcast. I was once again on Rob Snow White's Fly Fishing Consultant talking about books, fly fishing books. So I have known Rob, I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, back when I had my 10-year anniversary podcast. I've known Rob for quite a while. It was before I got married, and this year was 23 years of marriage? Yes, 23. 22, excuse me. Anyway, I met Rob before that. I actually remember sitting in the Orvis store I worked at, looking at the receipt for the wedding ring, the engagement ring that I had bought. I bought the engagement ring from money I earned at Orvis. Anyway, so all that to say, I got on to Rob's podcast again. We talked about all manner of things: sandwiches, libraries, fly fishing books, Mossy Creek. And it was a good time. It's like an hour plus, so you get to hear me a little bit more, and you get to hear people ask me questions as opposed to me asking myself questions, which may be a novel and a unique thing for you. So you can find Rob's podcast. I would say subscribe to it anywhere you find podcasts. I will put a link for it because he's part of the Waypoint Network also. Did you know that Casting Across is part of the Waypoint TV network, where you can find all sorts of podcasts, including Captain's Collective and April Anchored with April, all sorts of great podcasts here at Waypoint. Rob's there too, including his most recent podcast, which features me, Matthew Lordeau of Casting Across. Thanks for listening to the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast. Please subscribe to your favorite podcast app and rate the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Then head over to castingacross.com for 3 posts a week on the people, place, and things that go into the pursuit of fish.
Habitat loss is the greatest threat to our flats fisheries. That's why Bonefish and Tarpon Trust has been committed to restoring and conserving essential fish habitat for more than 25 years. From Florida to Belize, from the Bahamas to Mexico, we're restoring natural flows, replanting mangroves, and opposing unwise coastal development. But we can't do it alone. Help us bring science to the fight for the future of the fisheries we love. Become a member today at btt.org.
Want to plan your next fishing trip without the hassle? FishingBooker.com is the best way to find and book a fishing charter anywhere in the world. Whether you're chasing trophy fish or just looking for a family day on the water, Fishing Booker makes it simple, fast, and secure. With thousands of experienced guides, verified reviews, and 24/7 customer support, Fishing Booker takes the guesswork out of planning. Visit FishingBooker.com and book your trip today. Fishing Booker. Fishing trips made easy.